Good evening. When we receive a lesson such as we received last night, we are often apt to believe that this is it, there is nothing else, and all we need to do is encompass such a message. And this is not quite so. There is no such thing as any lesson or any message that we can ever receive about which we can say, this is it, or that this encompasses all. And as a matter of fact, I will go as far as to say that if you read every book and booklet of the infinite way, you still must not say, this is it, and this encompasses all there is. The absolute truth is this. All of the truth of the entire spiritual kingdom is embodied in only two words. And one need not go any further than those two words for their entire life's salvation, if they encompass them. Now, the difficulty that we experience when we accept a lesson, deep and wonderful as it was, the lesson of last night, is that we are apt to remove it from its context, from the entire message, and then we would go wrong. In other words, never study last night's lesson separate and apart from Monday night or tonight. Because if you do, you are apt to miss the way. Let me explain this. When we have a lesson or receive an impartation on that blessed I, if we have received it in the depth of humility as Moses did, as Jesus did, we will probably make no mistakes, although it is said that in the end Moses made a mistake. Even with all the depth of his understanding and demonstration. The reason is that somewhere along the line an individual is apt to believe that a human being is God. That because we use the word I, that we may substitute once in a while the word Joel. It has been done, you know. Whole teachings have evolved in the world which would make it appear as if man were God, as if a human being could walk around saying, I am, or I am God, or I am Spirit. Now, in the ancient days, before there were printing presses, when there were only manuscripts, it was impossible for the people to have even a very slight knowledge of truth. truth always was locked up in monasteries, ashramas, brotherhoods, religious orders, schools of mystery, and those of these schools were scholars, were thinkers, and of course were educated to read and write. And they had access to all of the manuscripts that passed from generation to generation on the subject of truth. Every one of these orders has had the same experience, that somewhere along the line some of its members got the belief that they were learning about personal powers, powers they could take unto themselves and use. And so out of these came what is known today, and what was known even then, as the Black Brotherhoods. Now the Black Brotherhoods were always made up of these educated, cultured, refined scholars studying truth and wrongly interpreting it, and then attempting to use it for personal gain, personal fame, personal motives, and thereby lost their memberships in the White Brotherhood and formed others which later were called Black Brotherhoods. Now, it is in this same way that, and all of this came about, remember, because the truth about I was taught, and these poor souls interpreted I to be Joel, Jim, James, Robert, and then thought, aha, now with this secret we can do wonders. Oh, now I have power. Now I can do this and I can do that, and I can use this power. So it is that if we take a lesson like last night and we are not very careful, we also might misinterpret it and gather the idea that, well, now we can walk out of here and within a few years from now we ought to be at least governor of the state on the way to the White House. Or whatever it is that our particular ambition might direct us to. Therefore, be sure that all teachings, all messages that you read or study that have to do with I, please remember that you are not talking or thinking or reading about a human being, but the divinity which appears as individual being but never imparts its power to the individual, but expresses it as or through the individual. And that I will explain to you in this way. Even the master, after he was a master, had 3 temptations in the wilderness. You would think that after you get to be a master there are no more temptations, but let the experience of Jesus free you from any such belief. There are temptations all along the way. And what were these temptations that he faced? I call it I-ness. I-N-E-S-S. I-ness. The tempter said, if you are the Son of God, of course you have power. So jump off this cliff. Nothing will harm you. Had the master done that his ministry would have ended there and then, because the eye that would jump would be the eye that believed it had spiritual power, and it would soon learn that it had none. Had Jesus fallen from that mountain or been pushed, he would instantly have realized the presence of God, and it would have picked him up and carried him down, because there was no I-ness there. He was tempted to turn stones into bread. Don't you ever allow yourself to be tricked by anybody into making a demonstration to prove that what you know is true, because you will lose. The eye that tries to make a demonstration, the eye that tries to prove it has understanding, is a mortal, it is a myth, it is without power. But if you are ever pushed into a demonstration, be assured that merely by closing your eyes and waiting, the I that I am will pick you up and carry you through, because there is an absence of I-ness, which really means personal sense. God is not personal sense, and personal sense is not God. In orthodoxy, we are confronted with this problem when, for instance, some church or some nation believes that God is on our side. Well, now, if we remember the fate of the ships that went down, the Blitz of London and Coventry, you'd have to believe that God was on the German side, until you saw Berlin, Munich, Dresden, and Leipzig, and then you'd believe, well, God switched in the middle. If you saw the ruins of Pearl Harbor, I'm sure you'd be convinced that God was not on our side. Our ships lay wrecked, our men lay dead and wounded. And the other side went off scot-free. But there too, I guess, God changed sides. And along came Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It is a terrible thing to believe that God is on the side of humans in view of the catastrophes that are continually happening to humans. Whether those humans are momentarily in the right or wrong, good or bad, history does not show that God is on the side of humans, on the side of any humans. It is only when we rise above that sense of personal selfhood that we find God on our side. There was an experience in the last war at Dunkirk, which I believe shows beyond all doubt that God was on the scene, but not on the scene of humans. It was on the scenes of those men who were in the air, absolutely selfless in the realization that they of themselves could do nothing, in the realization that as humans they were gone. As humans there was no hope. And in the absence of that I-ness, God took over. And a miracle took place, a whole series of miracles. And from all the evidence there, I don't even believe an atheist would doubt that God was on that scene. So it is. God is with us when we rise above personal sense and personal powers, because God constitutes our being, but God does not constitute the being of a mortal indulging good and evil. That was Paul's sense when he said, the creature that cannot please God and is not under the law of God, neither indeed can be. Then he said, but ye are the sons of God, if so be the Spirit of God dwell in you. As you rise above personal sense, as you rise above personal sense of power, to where you no longer say, I am good, or I am spiritual, or I have God power, and realize I can of my own self do nothing. If I speak of myself, I bear witness to a lie. And then be so completely absent from personal sense, then you will find that the I that I am, the Spirit of God in you, the Christ that dwelleth in you, will pick you up. You'll find that underneath are the everlasting arms. You will find that every step of your way is God-governed, God-guided. But be assured of this, self must be out of the way. There must be no sense that I can do this or I can do that, but rather the definite inner conviction, not an affirmation, not a cliche, an absolute inner conviction that only by the grace of God am I immortal, eternal, infinite, and all the rest. So it is. Watch carefully that you do not lose your, we'll just use the word humility. And I do not use that word in the ordinary human sense of humility, but the pure, true humility, which is an absence of any belief that any individual anywhere on the globe has personal powers. Only in that being absent from the body, absent from personal selfhood, can the Spirit of God take over and perform its functions. He performeth that which is given me to do, if so be I can become a vacuum. If so be I can lose myself and open myself to this transcendental presence and power. But if I am in the way, then I cannot come in. Again, I remind you of the story of the one who went to heaven. As long as there is two, God does not function. As long as there is me and God, or as long as I believe that I have in some way acquired God powers, God cannot function. It is only when I know beyond all doubt that I of my own self am nothing, only then is it possible for God power to operate. And then no one can say afterward that I did it, or my understanding, or my wisdom, or my spirituality. Then, do not forget this. Do not go to the other extreme and separate God from yourself, from your individual identity, for Christ and Jesus is one. And Christ and I are one. Christ and he, or Christ and she, Christ and you. And that is explained in this way. As a human being, this is the unillumined mind, the darkened mind of sense. There is no Christ there, no Spirit of God. But as an individual turns their thought, regardless of why, they may be driven to God through danger, they may be driven through sin, disease, lack. It makes no difference why. What counts is the fact that for some reason we decide to turn to God and begin to abide in God. That is, we either read the Bible or our religious literature, or we practice some mode of keeping the mind stayed on God, or we practice some mode of acknowledging God in all our ways, or abiding in the Word and letting the Word abide in us, and the daily, hourly practice of this wears away that opaque sense of being and makes of our thought or mind or consciousness a transparency. And then, with this false sense of self removed, even in a degree, the true light, Christ, begins to be manifest. And eventually, as in the case of Jesus and some others, human sense almost completely disappears. Never completely while in the flesh, but almost completely. And they are then clear, true, pure transparencies for God. And then we can say, Jesus the Christ, or Jesus the Christed One, or Jesus the Anointed One, or Jesus the Illumined, or Jesus the Messiah, because the two have now become one. Well, in some measure, everyone who reaches consistently and consciously toward the atmosphere of God has, right from the start, some tiny Christ light which becomes that much of their consciousness. As they continue in it, they eventually come to a place where they find that they may heal themselves or another. And by that time, they have attained more of that Christ consciousness merely by eliminating some of the sense of I-ness. And so as they continue, more and more Christ mind becomes their individual mind, and so on, until it is possible that we may again have someone, or more than one, attain that mind which was also in Christ Jesus. I mean, the fullness of that mind which was also in Christ Jesus. Everyone who heals has some measure of it. Everyone who is beginning to lose their hate, love, and fear of error has some measure of it. Everyone who is beginning to understand the non-power of either matter or mind has some measure of it. And the degree of the Christ mind that we have and can demonstrate is in proportion to the removal of that I-ness. Now, remember, the I that I'm talking about that has to be removed is the I that fears, the I that doubts, the I that judges, criticizes, condemns, hates, the I that cannot surrender its personal self. That is the barrier to our demonstration of that mind which was also in Christ Jesus. When the Master said to the woman taken in adultery, "Neither do I condemn thee," he added, "But go and sin no more. Do not return to that same state of consciousness, or else it will externalize itself in the same way." So it is. There are two sides to the lesson of I. There is understanding it from the standpoint of that blessed I which I am, and then being very careful not to let that develop a sense of I-ness which believes that I have spiritual power or God has given me His power. God never surrenders God's power and we can never be other than a transparency for it. It is especially true in the spiritual field that we are apt to develop I-ness if we're not careful. That is why the temptation came to the master even when he was a master. There may be some, I hope not, but there may be some who may believe that there is an individual on earth who could draw together a class like this. Don't ever let yourselves believe that. Nobody has ever been empowered to draw together such a gathering, such a group of people as you are. That has to be done by the Spirit of God in you, causing you to move. Don't ever believe that anyone else can do it but the divine impulse that is within you. Yes, I'm sure that if we want to go out and advertise and promise health, wealth, and happiness and 6 easy lessons, that we could get a lot of people here, but they wouldn't be you. They would be gullible people. They would be those who still believe you can get something for nothing or get it the easy way. You are drawn because you are seeking the light, and you are drawn to that place which is not offering an easy way of life, holding out no inducements, merely from what you have read yourself has led you to see that here at least is a promise of spiritual realization, for the demonstration of God, and that not the easy way, for the books reveal that. So it is, whether your work takes you into spiritual fields, or whether it takes you into commerce, art, literature, science, try to realize this. There are human ways of getting on top. They are not your ways. You can get to the top only in the surrender of personal powers, only in the degree of becoming a transparency through which divine ideas can flow, spiritual ideas, ideas which universally bless. Then you will find that everything is drawn to you in harmony, in peace, in order. And now you may ask the question, how is it, why is it, that there is a human world, a human selfhood, which is not under the law of God, neither indeed can be? For the answer to this, you go back to the book of Genesis. You learn in the first chapter of Genesis that God created this universe in His own image and likeness, and that it partook of the nature of God, spiritual, perfect, immortal, eternal. When you come to the second chapter of Genesis, you find a different story. And as it was revealed to me, this second chapter of Genesis is the history of the human mind and its creations. The human mind creating in its own image and likeness and creating dream pictures. And that is why, as it was discovered back there in the days of the white and black brotherhoods, that is why you can manipulate with the mind and change the pictures. That is why you can manipulate with the mind and change the outer scene. It is because this that we call a human universe, a physical universe, is really not a physical universe at all, it's mental. It is a universe of mind appearing as form, and we call that form matter. It makes no difference whether you call it matter or not. It is mind formed, mind manifested, mind expressed, and it is governed by mind through thought, and therefore, if one's interest is solely the operation of manipulating the human scene, then of course the mind, to some extent, can be used as a power to manipulate, to change, to correct, to improve, and to destroy, because the human mind embodies the powers of both good and evil. You need no proof of that. You have only to examine your own thoughts through the years and count up some of the bad ones that got in there. Some of the desires that weren't good. Some of the fears that certainly weren't good. And even some of the appetites and desires that were far from good. And then you know that the human mind has the power to be good and to be evil. It can be philanthropic and it can be miserly. It can give and it can withhold. It can be virtuous and it can be devilish. And in the manipulation of the mind, this is also true. Many of you, of course, are familiar with that passage in Mrs. Eddy's writings in which she says, "The day is coming when the thief will not have to enter your house to steal. You will bring your possessions to his door," or words to that effect. You almost saw that day with subliminal perception when you carried your pocketbooks right downstairs where you were told to and left it with the Coca-Cola and popcorn man. Not that you wanted Coca-Cola or popcorn, but that man wanted your money. And he told you so and you brought it to him. And of course I don't have to tell you about the investigations now on foot of fraudulent advertising. And here's another example of where you bring your cash to the thief. Now, if this were the whole story, the world would be in a very sad plight, but it isn't. Those who discovered this principle of the operation of the human mind in centuries gone by did grow into great power, did have their way for a while, and then collapsed, and the bottom fell out, and virtue triumphed. But later centuries came along, and some other people learned of these principles, and again the eternal battle between good and evil went on, and for quite a while evil was on top, and then eventually overthrown, and we start a new deal. And that has been going on all down through the centuries, and the reason is that the manipulation of the mind by the mind always reacts upon the one that uses it. This is a law of action and reaction, a law of cause and effect. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. And if you sow to the flesh, you will reap corruption. And if anybody believes that that is in the Bible as a joke, We're going to learn about the sense of humor, because nothing of a funny nature and nothing of a fictional nature about those statements. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. Now, as long then as we are in the realm of the manipulation of the mind by the mind, whether it's done individually or collectively, the end of that man who uses it is worse than the beginning, and he would be far better off to have a millstone strung around his neck and dumped into the lake. But he doesn't know it until too late. Now, throughout the ages, wherever this power of mind has been known and used for either personal, selfish, or evil purposes, while some have suffered under it, in the end, it was those who threw the stone that were hit with it. Those who sowed to the power of the mind reaped the corruption that is inevitable. Now, however, we are entering a different age, and that is why you should not be surprised when you read in the December letter that peace was established on earth some months ago. And you will read of it. A new day has dawned, a new age has dawned, in which the discovery has been given to us, the revelation has been given to us, of how to stop the action of mind manipulation. How it can be stopped individually and collectively. How it can be stopped not only to stop such activities as subliminal perception, but even to stop storms, stop hurricanes, stop tornadoes, and stop them dead before they do their damage. This comes under the heading of an understanding of the origin of evil. We know the origin of evil. We've had it proven, and we've had the remedy proven, so that part of the healing work that is accomplished in this work is accomplished by that very understanding that mind, the mind of man, and its thoughts is no more power than matter. And this ends mental causes, just as it ends physical diseases. You can't end the physical disease without ending the mental cause, and the mental cause we know. Now, the mental cause isn't resentment, anger, jealousy, malice. It is that which produced envy, jealousy, malice, lust, hate, greed in the human mind. Handling such things as hate, envy, jealousy, malice, lust, this is like handling little leaves on a tree instead of cutting the tree down right at the roots. And so we don't handle or work against any of these trifles of human thought or effects of the human mind, but we go right to the root and nullify the action and power of that which has been called creative mind. Not the creative consciousness which is God, but that false sense of it, which is the mind of the individual functioning not at the level of conscious deviltry. Heavens, no. Never give a treatment to a person, and never believe that a person is evil. and never treat a person. Heavens no. The mind we're talking about is the universal mesmeric mind which operates as the mind of human beings. Therefore, we leave the mind of human beings alone. We don't tamper with it. We don't try to improve it or kill it or destroy it. We ignore it and go to the root and then watch. The effects are exactly that as when you impersonalize in your healing work. Remember, if you for a minute accept a man or woman or child as being evil, as having evil propensities, as being nasty, as being immoral, as being dishonest, all you're doing is malpracticing yourself. All you're doing is working with a fleshly mind, judging, condemning. This is no part of infinite way activity. The entire basis of our work is impersonalizing and nothingizing. And when you realize then that the mind that hates, the mind that is envious, the mind that is jealous, isn't the mind of an individual, it is the universal, false sense of mind, mesmeric mind, call it what you will, Adamic mind, and then nothingize it and realize its impotency in the face of God's presence, then you will understand how you prevent its operation in human experience, and you elevate not only those who would have been the victims of these things, but those who themselves would innocently or ignorantly have been avenues through which this carnal or mortal mind would operate. That is why I say, do not believe that knowing your true identity is the full story. It isn't. Because even knowing your full identity, you are left with the appearances. You are left with what the Master called this world, that which he said he had overcome. We will overcome this world, individually and collectively, as we learn never to point a finger at man, woman, or child, or group of men, women, or children, and realize that all evil is impersonal. All evil is impotent. It is the arm of flesh or nothingness. Being impersonal, it has no person in which, on which, through which to operate or against which to operate. Watch the miracle of healings that take place in your experience when you can forget the image of the patient or the tyrant and withdraw from judgment, criticism, condemnation, and realize, aha, this is the devil, the tempter. This is that carnal mind which is not enmity against God, but which is an arm of flesh. When you are faced with what we call destructive weather, cyclones, tidal waves, all the rest of these unnatural forces of weather, please remember that actually there's no such thing as good weather or bad weather. All weather is absolutely perfect. But all weather would be as still as it is in this room if something didn't set it in motion, and that something is the universal carnal mind, the belief in two powers, and as you impersonalize it and nothingize it, it stops, and it stops dead. I only tell you this because we've experimented. And in our experiments we have 100% results. Not 90 and not 85 and not 95. In every case, it has stopped dead in its tracks before it landed. And it is ye who must know the truth, and the truth will make you free. It is you who know the truth who must consciously know the truth. This too is carnal mind, not enmity against God, but the arm of flesh, or no power. And then watch it dissolve. Watch it as it calms down and moves on. It is no mystery anymore, the origin of evil, or its remedy. It still remains for us to demonstrate the entire harmony of being by our working with these principles until we have come to that place where, in the absence of a personal sense of I, the principle itself can work. That is why it sounds so strange when you witness any degree of puffed upness in some students when they falsely believe that they have achieved something great, like the disciples when they believed that they had power over evil. There's your humor in the Bible. You can just see it. They had power over evil. The Master gave them their rebuke. I'll never make such a statement, you have power over evil. The secret is that evil hasn't any power over you. That's the secret. What did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. Open your eyes. Lazarus, come forth. That doesn't mean you have power over evil. That means evil has no power over you. And in proportion as you lose that puffed upness, personal pride, belief that you found a great God on your side, give that up and realize the truth. You've merely been given a principle of life, the principle of life, that thou couldst have no power over me unless it came from the Father. Thou couldst have no power over me unless it came from the Father. Then remember this. You don't need any power to heal. You need the recognition, the realization of the great truth that that which is appearing as the carnal mind is only the arm of flesh, nothingness. Then you can do your healing works. And that is why I say to students, please, don't go out of here and tell this to anyone. All you do is lose it for yourself. Keep it locked up within you until by your fruitage it has been made evident. Don't even try to teach it to anyone. Don't get the false idea that we are enamored of numbers, that we are eager to have a big following. Don't get such ideas because it's far from truth. Give me a half a dozen students able and willing to realize that there is a principle of life and that this principle of life is the power, and I will have had more joy out of my work than having you write me that you have 200 students or 500, for that really makes no impression upon me. I have never gone out after numbers. I have never advertised. I have never sent for anyone, and never will. It isn't numbers. It is students drawn of the Spirit who can realize within themselves that God created this universe and God maintains it and sustains it without any human help. Our function is to know the truth. When we know the truth of the nature of evil and how to handle it, we will find then that all that we have learned is, thou canst have no power over me unless it came from the Father. In other words, that whatever it is that appears as a formation or activity of the carnal mind or mortal mind is the arm of flesh. And don't fear it, but rather rest in that word. And as you come face to face with evildoers, as you must in this work, please don't personalize it. Don't get mad at them. They can't help it. They're the victims of it as much as you would be if you permitted yourself to get mad. Just turn within and realize, I see a devil standing over there. But all you're doing is tempting. And when we say, get thee behind me, you have to fade. Your part in the play is over. It's a quick one, too, if we make it so. If we dawdle, play around with that devil, lead him on a bit, he'll get us. We have to be quick and sharp and powerful in saying no. We have to be quick and sharp and powerful in realizing the principle of the infinite way. And the principle is no power. No power. None. I don't even need a God power over evil. No, no, no. You don't have power over evil. Evil has no power over you. Be glad that your name is written in heaven, that you're one of the eternal and immortal angels flying around without wings, except the wings on your heels that you get from traveling in airplanes. No, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, and that has no right to puff you up. That has no right to give you any sense of personal power. It should give you the sense of smiling at the non-power of that which the world has been hating, fearing, and in some cases even loving. You remember, some of you, in some of our classes when we have touched on supply, and we have used the illustration, and one which I still like to use often, because to me it seems so true, that of money. This time it's a coin, but it could just as well be a bill. And here it is on the table, and you look at it, or in your mind's eye picture a dollar bill. See how dead it is. There it lies, and it can't do anything. It can't go to you, and it can't come to me. It can't buy a newspaper. You wouldn't believe that a dollar bill can't buy a newspaper, but it can't. I can, but the dollar bill can't. It's dead, absolutely dead. And once you become, or let money become dead to you, you have conquered it. Its only hold over you is the belief that it has life, that it has power, that it can do something, that it can be something. Well, in some cases it can. I read last week of a hotel in England that accepted $500 in Confederate currency for a night's lodging. They evidently believed it could do something. No, it can't. Money is dead, and the moment you realize it, in that moment it has lost its power over you. And when it has lost its power over you, it is exactly the same as when you can look at the season of colds, grip, and flu, and say to all these infectious and contagious germs, thou couldst have no power over me. You may be a germ, but you're dead, unless I give you the life to believe in you. Can we prove it? Why, haven't we been proving it for 90 years? That germs, infection, and contagion isn't power? Haven't we been healing it metaphysically for all the years of the metaphysical world? How could we if it was a power? It would laugh at us. But it isn't power. And none of these germs that are in the world have any more power than the universal carnal mind gives it. individualized by your belief. But one with God is a majority. And therefore, one practitioner who knows this truth heals hundreds of peoples of colds, grip, and flu. And then if they stay with that practitioner, they'll prove to them that it won't come back next year or the year after or the year after that. Once you have demonstrated that germs are dead to you, you don't deny their existence, because that would be foolish. They have existence. You can see them under the microscope. There are germs, lots of them. But they can have no power over you unless that power were given them of God, for God is the law unto all being, and that law is spiritual law. So it is. Germs must become dead to you. Money must become dead to you. Then you are the master, and then you find that there's no lack, there's no limitation, because you're not giving power to that which is dead. You're giving the power to that which is the power, I. I am the bread and the meat and the wine and the water. Not dollar bills. I am the bread and the meat and the wine and the water. I am life eternal. In the same way, the organs and functions of the body, they have to become dead to you too. If you believe that your heart gives you life, of course you must believe that your heart can deprive you of life. When you understand that it is your life which supports your heart, now you're at the right end. It is your life, the life which I am, which governs the heart and all the organs and functions of the body. But instead of looking down at the body and fearing it, let the body become dead to you and understand it as being dead. There it is, and it can't move unless I move it. And become aware of that this body can't feel, it can't have sensation, pleasurable or not, unless I am there to determine its nature. And when this body becomes that dead to you, you become alive with a body subject unto the I which I am, the life which is eternal. And there we are again. Isn't that terrible? All right, let us have our period of rest. Now let us talk about a subject that is very close to all of us here, and one which has presented many mysteries to us, but which can be made very clear if you are willing. The Christian revelation is one that concerns individual being. There is no mass demonstration about Christianity. The kingdom of God is within you. It has nothing to do with masses. It has to do with an individual, you. Healing is always an individual experience. It's always rise, pick up your bed, and walk. That's not addressed to a mass. It's addressed to an individual. What did hinder you? That's to an individual, not to a mass. Christianity deals with individual you, individual me. It promises no mass salvation. As the 91st Psalm says, if you dwell in the secret place of the Most High, none of these evils will come nigh your dwelling place, but 1,000 may fall at your left and 10,000 at your right. So does Jesus Christ confirm that when he says, if you abide in me and let my word abide in you, you will bear fruit richly. But if you do not, then he tells you the lack of fruitage that will come into your experience. So it is that we wonder often why we do not receive the healings that we seek, or why they come more slowly than we believe they should. But we do not remember that a healing is the result of a change of consciousness. And we like to think that we can turn for help to God, to Jesus Christ, or to a practitioner or teacher of today, and just stay the same human being today that we were yesterday, and by some kind of a miracle, God's grace is going to descend upon us and make us healthy, wealthy, and wise. And when it doesn't happen, well, I have had letters saying to me, I thought that you claimed that you healed, but I'm not getting any better. I can understand that too. In the Sermon on the Mount, which certainly is understood to be the greatest piece of writing that ever was, we are presented with two ways of life. And we have a choice, so it would seem. Ye have heard it said of old, we might pick out a few of those passages just for unfoldment, to see what happens with these. Or he tells us here in the 5th chapter of Matthew, which is the Sermon on the Mount, think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. That's a horrible indictment, because it actually means that if we bring ourselves under the law, we have no right to believe that the Christ will free us. We will fulfill ourselves under the law. Because he says, whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Now, he says, and this is the crux of it, when you think of spiritual healing, think of this. For I say unto you, that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no wise enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees was this: they obeyed the law to the fullest. They really obeyed the law. They did not disobey the law. And if that's the best you can do, it isn't good enough. Because obeying the law is the least of the Christ teaching. Except your righteousness be greater than obeying the law. And now let's see how he defines that. Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill. Whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. So the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees would be this: they would not kill. They would be obedient to that law, and they would not kill. But that isn't enough. That is just enough to be a good Hebrew. That is just good enough to be one of the scribes and Pharisees, one of those who obey the law but who cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Because whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Whosoever shall say, Thou fool, shall be in danger of hellfire. Now witness this difference. If you are in obedience to the law and refrain from murder, you are under the law and you will never be punished for murder. But if that is all you can do, neither will you gain entrance to heaven. For to gain entrance to heaven means to have a state of mind, a state of consciousness that does not fight back, that does not resist evil, that does not set up defenses or pick up the sword. There is the difference between Judaism, as it was taught of old, Christianity as it came in later. The Hebrews as a whole were a good people, a righteous people, a law-abiding people, but they could not enter the kingdom of heaven. That same thing applies today. Only today it makes no difference whether it's Hebrew or whether it's Christian, because actually there are no Christian churches. All of whom we have any knowledge, all would be classified as good Hebrews, because in all churches they are taught to obey the law and nothing beyond that. And it is the beyond that that entails spiritual demonstration and spiritual healing, so that even if you never committed murder, never committed adultery, never stole, never did any of those things that are mentioned in the Ten Commandments, you still would gain no entrance into spiritual living, spiritual healing, or spiritual whatever it is that is called heaven, harmony. Now, as you go along, you find therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Now just imagine that if you came to the altar and left your tithe there, and attended the service, and went through all the rites and ceremonies of the church, you still would be nothing more than a good scribe or Pharisee, a good Hebrew. Because until you took the next step, you would not be able to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the next step is described as becoming reconciled to thy brother. Now, of what does that consist? Because again, it has no relationship to going out and saying, do you forgive me or I forgive you? That again is nothing but a ceremony or a rite. To become reconciled to thy brother means to be able to go off in the corner and ask yourself the question, is man mortal or material? Are we dealing with human beings, some good and some bad, or is my brother the Son of God? Do I accept the fact that all being is spiritual, that God is the only Father of this race, Therefore, all of us are brothers in Christ. That is being reconciled. When an individual sits in their own home or in their own church without another soul knowing what is going on in his mind, and becomes reconciled, opens himself to the realization that, not that I'm not bigoted, not that I'm not prejudiced, but I have nothing to be bigoted about or prejudiced about, because there is only one creative principle of life, that is one God, one Father of us all. Therefore, we are united in Him. We live and move and have our being in Him, in what the Master called the household of God, all one family. On the outer plane, we may not be able to mingle with each other that way, for the simple reason that each one fills a place in their own cultural background, social background, commercial background. But that doesn't mean that up here that we are holding each other in bondage to those appearances, but rather that within us we are making the acknowledgement of one. You see, unless we can do that, even though we have obeyed all the laws and been to church and been through all the ceremonies, we cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, as you go through the Sermon on the Mount, we'll come down here just a little way for this example. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Now let's admit this, won't you? That it isn't only Brother Shylock who felt that way, but that is the measure of the human race, and that's the code by which the human race lives. You sin and you go to prison if you get caught, regardless of what you do. It's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. It's always being demanded of us, and we demand of the other. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. And that today is interpreted as being impossible to do. Now the question will not arise in this room as to whether or not it is possible to accomplish. There's only one question that will come up here tonight, and that is, there is no other way of entering the kingdom of heaven than achieving it. So if it's so impossible, give up also the belief or possibility of attaining heaven, harmony, or even spiritual healing. Because until we can bring ourselves to that state of consciousness, whether or not we're ever called upon to prove it in life, but to bring ourselves to that state of consciousness in which we can take whatever it is that the human world measures out to us without the desire for revenge or vengeance, without the desire to get back at, without the desire to see even the wrongdoers punished. In other words, ours would have to be the same measure that the Master showed at his capture when Peter took out the sword. Put up thy sword, for those that live by the sword will die by the sword. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. He did not ask God to punish them, nor did he say, God will punish you, nor did he say, you will get what's coming to you, but, Father, forgive them. Now, yes, I heard that. It isn't easy. Of course it isn't. The Master said that. The Master said it wasn't easy. Few there be that enter. That's how difficult it is.
few there be that enter. But with us, as we are on this spiritual journey, the question doesn't come up whether it's difficult or easy, nor does it come up, will we succeed? Even that question doesn't come up. All that comes up is this true, and can we determine to try it? Now, you know, each one of us is entitled to 490 failures before it counts against them. So there should be no fear in our thought that, well, we can't succeed. We don't have to succeed. All we have to do, and all we're called upon to do, is acknowledge that this is the spiritual mode of life, and that insofar as the grace of God permits, I will live up to that teaching which is embodied under the part that says, I say unto you. The part that says, ye have heard it said of old, that's the part that we have to relinquish. The part that says, but I say unto you, is the part that we accept. Now, supposing we do accept it tonight and fall down in trying to live up to it tomorrow. That's only 1 out of 490. 70 times 7 we're going to be forgiven for our failures. So let's not worry about failure. Let's not worry about whether it's impossible to achieve. Let us agree among ourselves, is our aim in life being a good human being and obeying the laws and not being sent to jail and so forth? Or do we have the higher goal of entering the kingdom of heaven? Now, wherever there is a willingness on the part of an individual to be transformed into the image and likeness of God, you will find a receptive consciousness with which to work for spiritual living and spiritual healing. It is the individual who is steeled against any willingness to change from being what he is that gives us the resistance that we often cannot overcome. It is the individual sometimes who is, I don't mean the sinner, oh heavens, if I could only have all sinners to work with, what an easy path I'd have. Oh, how willing the sinners are to give up their sins. How eagerly they reach out to us to help them, to show them the way. But oh, the good man or woman who is so set in believing that they haven't killed anybody and haven't robbed anybody and haven't committed adultery, then why should this happen to me? Oh, no. No. Spiritual living entails a softness, a gentleness, a yielding. There must be a yielding consciousness. There must be a willingness to let go of this idea of he did it to me and I'll do it twice back to him. There must be a yielding from this not understanding the viewpoint of those who are our enemies. Because if they are wrong, our attitude will only settle them more in their wrongness. Whereas the ability to say, Father, forgive them, to bring to them a gentleness, a willingness that they be opened, is the thing that makes room in their very consciousness for a change of mind, a change of heart, a willingness to see. As you follow this, you will find, give to him that asketh of thee. There again, it is not resisting. Here, of course, is the most difficult. Ye have heard that it hath been said, there we are, back of old, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And then he tells you why. That ye may be children of God. Now here we are, we walk around in our metaphysical wisdom, and we declare that we are the children of God. And over again we repeat it, and we hope that by much mouthing of it, it'll come true. But affirmations won't make us the children of God. But praying for our enemies will, forgiving our enemies will, having a softness to this world, a yielding attitude, will make us children of God. Now, it is the children of God that are joint heirs with Christ. And never forget that. And never forget that you are not a child of God, no matter how many affirmations you make, until you begin to fulfill this part of the Sermon on the Mount that has to do with I say unto you. It's a very strange thing that so few people can accept, that this master says, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. It seems strange, according to our human code, that God does not punish sinners. And of course he doesn't mean that sinners go unpunished, because he has earlier revealed how sin is punished. With what measure ye meet, that's the measure that you get back. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. So the punishment is there, but the punishment isn't from God. The punishment is in our own fulfilling of the law of good or the law of evil. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? And isn't it true that the human race, as a rule, does love those who love them? But oh, the difficulty the other way. I had the experience many, many years ago when I was serving in an organization that was trying to get our government to send food to China and to India. And at that time, the Chinese and the Indians were just falling in the streets and dying of starvation. And at that very time, we were plowing under our crops. We were paying farmers not to raise crops. And here were these people starving, and the only answer we could get from Washington is they're not our friends. Now, that's not unusual. That's not unusual. I have said to groups before this that even humanly we could ensure peace on earth for hundreds of years to come. I'm not speaking now of our spiritual demonstration. That will come. But even humanly, there is a way that would within 24 hours wipe out all possibility of war. You see, in the Middle East, there are over 1 million Muslims in one concentration camp. And they are being supported by the United Nations at the rate of 25 cents per day, which has to cover food, lodging, clothing, education, medical expenses. On the other side, there are somewhat over 250,000 Hebrews who have been thrown out of Algeria and Egypt. And they also are in concentration camps because there's no place for them to go. And they also get 25 cents a day for the same noble purpose. I have traveled in the areas in the Near East and the East, and I've seen numbers totaling into the millions who are living on that same 25 cents a day. And there is where all of the danger of war is coming from. If war comes, it will be between the Jews and the Muslims, or it will be between the Muslims and the Christians, or it will be between the communists and the nationalists. Why? Not so much because of the governments, but because of the people who are starving, the people who are living a whole generation without the chance of going into a schoolroom, without the chance of having adequate clothing on their back, and never once being adequately fed. That's where our breeding places are right now of the danger of war. And I can tell you it would be very difficult to foment a war if all of those people were being taken care of and knew that there was love on earth. Somebody that cared. You wouldn't get them into armies to fight. But this way, they don't need arms and ammunition. Just give them a pocket knife and they'll go to war. And you can't blame them from the standpoint of where they are at the moment. And so it is. When the Master says then, what reward have you if you love those that love you? What reward have you when you send food and clothing and even arms of protection to your own allies and your own friends, for do not even the publicans the same? But, and if you salute your brethren only, what do you more than the others? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And that perfection, I go back again, can only be individual, it can't be collective. Neither you nor I can be responsible for what is done by our governments. We can, to the best of our ability, vote according to our own intelligence, where voting is allowed. But that is not the answer. We cannot force our governments, any of us, to do anything it doesn't want to do. Therefore, we cannot hold ourselves responsible for mass action. But it isn't the government that has driven you and me to the spiritual way of life. It is our individual salvation that concerns us. We are not here to live and move and have our being in spiritual consciousness because of any mass movement. It is because individually you and I have been compelled to seek the spiritual life. So it is that even though we may not be responsible, and as I say, I have served with committees trying to bring about these better conditions and with no success, I know now that that is not our function. Our function is to perform these things to the best of our ability, individually, in groups where possible. There are ways. The first way, of course, is that we acknowledge the rightness of this. Before we acknowledge the rightness of it, we can't act on it. But if we can acknowledge that, yes, I have loved my relatives and my friends, I have made provision for sending my children to school, and possibly even helped out some of our community. But according to this, have I gone far enough? When it dawns on your consciousness that you haven't, and you begin to search yourself, very quickly you will find ways and means, not merely physically or financially, but sometimes only spiritually through prayer, to help set your brother free. Whether you free him of punishment by praying for forgiveness, whether you do no more than become reconciled with your brother inside of yourself and recognize that God's grace must be a universal activity and that it must fall on the just and the unjust. If only we succeed to that extent, we have opened our consciousness for the dawn of spiritual realization, which results in what we call spiritual healing. Consciousness is now open to receive the grace of God, because the healing, the spiritual healing, is an act of grace. It's not the act of a human being. It is an act of grace. But an individual must themselves open their consciousness to receive an act of grace, and the Master has shown us how we can do it. When we have a transformation of consciousness so that we no longer live only by the law, when we're no longer just satisfied that we're not breaking the Ten Commandments and that we are contributing to our community chest or so forth and on, but when we've gone a step further than all that and become to open ourselves to this spiritual living, and read the Sermon on the Mount, read it 1,000 times until it impresses itself upon you that there are two ways of life. The way the world is living now, the old Hebrew way. You have heard it said of old. Or the new dispensation, which he gave and which has not yet been accepted. That of living according to a divine grace. Living according to a law of love, but not loving your neighbor who is your friend, but loving the neighbor who is also your enemy. Then you'll find that you yourself have opened your own consciousness to grace because you're reconciling yourself with your brother, you're loving the enemy, is itself an act of grace. And that's what heals. Healing can't come to you from another. Healing has to come to you from within your own being. It has to be you placing your bread upon the waters, and then it's your bread that comes back to you. So that healing means opening and giving, letting flow life, truth, love, forgiveness, justice, mercy. When that happens, an act of grace has been performed by you, and the act of grace heals you. Even Jesus, when he was healing, could do no more than open the consciousness of those who were healed. And they themselves then had to, by some act of acceptance, provide the opportunity for that grace to perform. Stretch forth thine hand. Who could stretch forth a crippled hand? Nobody. So there had to be a release before the hand could be released. What cripple can rise and pick up his bed while he's crippled? No. Until the mind is uncrippled, the body's got to remain crippled. And so it is. We have practitioners and we have spiritual teachers on earth today, and they come to us to open our consciousness to this form of life. Not to insisting that we can go on being the old Hebrews and have Christian healing, but that we have to open ourselves to a Christian way of life so that the Christian grace can enter. And I don't mean Christian as a religion. You can just well be a Mohammedan or Hindu or Confucianist or Buddhist and have Christian grace, because by Christian I mean only spiritual, divine. You see, it's a strange thing when you're in this work and you come up against the adamant human thought that just is going to be a human being forever, but of course they're going to add a little spiritual healing to it. And then find surprise that it doesn't work. If your spiritual study and your practitioner or your teacher doesn't bring about in you a change of consciousness to where there is a greater love, a greater forgiveness, a greater forbearance, a greater sense of justice, a greater sense of peace, they're not preparing you for a spiritual healing. And if by chance you do have a healing, which often happens, through the practitioner's state of grace, and it has resulted in no state of grace or change of consciousness in you, your healing is nothing more or less than having been sick yesterday and well tomorrow with the possibility of being more sick tomorrow. You see, do not sin again, lest the worst thing come upon you. Do not go back and get angry with your brother. Do not get unforgiving. Do not get unloving. Do not get uncharitable. Do not go back to just fulfilling the law again, because you'll be under the law. But when you come to a spiritual teaching and you read the inspired passages in some of these writings, any of the writers who have written on spiritual things, I don't know how it's possible to be a human being again. I don't know how it's possible to believe that you can come into the atmosphere of these mystics, these who have lived in God and with God and through God, and then draw the conclusion that you can go on being that same kind of a human being and get some of the grace that that person's had whose life testifies to their willingness to live according to I say unto you. So it is that when you come to the next chapter and you read about do not your alms before men to be seen of them, again you have to be reminded of this. God is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. If what you do is meant to please men, you don't have any idea at all in your mind, unless you want to fool yourself, that your thought is on pleasing God, because it isn't. When you're ready to please God, you don't care whether your brother knows about it or not, or your fellow man. When you are serving God, you're not interested in whether anybody sees it, knows it, or hears about it. You have no interest in what man thinks about you, because at that time your heart and soul and your mind are on fulfilling the demands of God, not of men. How many times have the martyrs been martyred? How many times have they been led to the stake for violating the law? How many times have they been crucified or burned in oil for violating the law? Who cared? The martyrs? No, they broke the law to suit their own convenience. Or they care about the law. They are preaching Christ. And if man gets in their way, man's got to get out of their way. If not, they're willing to pay the penalty for it. But nothing is going to stop them preaching Christ, not even protecting themselves from jail or the stake. So it is that if you catch the vision of the Sermon on the Mount, you will engage in certain philanthropies, but you will come to the realization now that you're not doing it for man or to be seen of men or to be thanked by man, but for the fulfilling of a spiritual law of love. And one thing is sure, that in omnipresence, your heavenly Father that seeth in secret rewardeth openly. So it is with prayers. When we meet here and pray together, which is what our meditations amount to, it's not praying to be seen of men, because we're not here for that type of prayer. We are here, and nor are we praying for anything. We are here for instruction from the Father. Quite a different thing than if we went out of here and then met someplace just for the purpose of praying. Be sure then we would be saying, well, you did that to be seen of men. Here, we're here for instruction. Whatever goes on here is for nobody's glory. Whatever goes on here is merely for our mutual instruction in the things of Christ. But I should hate to go out of this room and conduct a public prayer somewhere. Some of you who have been with me in San Francisco, if there's anybody here, may remember how we stopped that thing of praying over collections in public halls. But quickly that was stopped. How nonsensical to get out in a public hall and start praying to God for increased supply. Sad enough to do it in secret without making a mocking spectacle of it in public. Now, the kingdom of God is within you. Here it is, right where I am, right where you are. And if I have to go to God, I have to go within. Or I'm not going to God, I'm going to man. Do I believe the kingdom of God is within me? You know I do. And that is why I'm willing to spend my time in contemplation, meditation, tabernacling with the Father within me, and the Father that seeth and knows whether I'm on the level or not inside, rewardeth accordingly. If I'm not, there's no use trying to fool the infinite intelligence of the universe or the divine love of the universe, because what it seeth in secret, that's the measure that comes back. Do you not see now that in establishing, in reconciling yourself with your brother, it isn't necessarily a public act? It is going within to the Father and acknowledging what our wrong is, writing it within ourselves, and then stepping forth in agreement that I must not sin again lest the worst thing come upon me. And even if it weren't going to come upon me, I have no right to go back to positions outgrown. You see, the Christian life is an individual life. There are no rules or regulations. There are no commandments. There is merely the injunction or the reminder that as we sow inside of our own being, the Father that seeth in secret will see that we reap. And our righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, because we must find a way of life that conforms to a spiritual standard and not a human standard. But thou, when thou fastest, anoint thine head and wash thy face, that thou appear not unto men to fast. Appear not to fast. How many times I've said, let's keep our business suits on and not wear uniforms, and let's keep our ordinary conversational tones, not this sanctimonious business, not let's pretend to the world how sanctimonious we are, or even try to convince them we are, when the only one we have to convince is the Father within. And there's only one way to convince the Father within, not with words or with thoughts, but by a mode of life that conforms to the Sermon on the Mount. You see, spiritual healing is a two-way project. A practitioner or teacher on the spiritual path cannot do very much healing if they are living alive, because it isn't the words that a practitioner thinks or speaks or writes that heals. It's the state of consciousness in which they are living on the inside. That is what opens the healing grace. The words in their lips can be lies. The thoughts in their mind can be foul. But when the life is lived inside, then the Father that seeth in secret is there. In other words, then, the healing agency is not words or thoughts. It's a state of consciousness. A state of consciousness that is imbued with a spiritual message and that is seeking, not that it succeeds to any too great an extent, but that is continuously seeking to live above the law of the scribes and the Pharisees. Now that's the one-way part of spiritual healing. The practitioner or the teacher must have come to some measure of living by grace instead of by human modes or means. But the second part is the patient or student. And that doesn't mean that a patient or student will not be healed until they're perfect. No. Most of the healing takes place through the practitioner's state of grace. But it does mean this, that there are some things that will not go out except by prayer and fasting, that will not go out until there has been a change of consciousness in the patient or student. But primarily it means that even though you have your healing physically, you have not advanced yourself a bit towards spiritual life until you yourself begin to yield to the spiritual impulses. Now, that doesn't involve asceticism. That doesn't involve not enjoying life. That merely involves what the Sermon on the Mount says, taking this attitude of life which is not out seeking forever to establish its own good, and which is not out fighting the human injustices except by prayer, by forgiveness. It's a change of an inner life more than it is an out. Children respond so easily to spiritual healing because they have not, in most cases, built up that adamant sense of self. Is there a way to achieve some measure of this without the use of willpower and force? And the answer is yes. The answer that we have discovered in the Infinite Way is this: that from the moment that you accept that there is neither good nor evil in person, thing, or condition, in that moment the inner yielding begins, because you are no longer fighting or opposing person or thing. The very moment that you can meditate. Now follow us in this meditation. There is a spirit in man, Spirit of God. Every individual is in its true being the offspring of a spiritual creator. Every individual is endowed with spiritual qualities and spiritual faculties. Every individual has soul capacities, God qualities, God instincts. Every individual is born in the very image and likeness of God, lives and moves and has its being in God. The good of that individual isn't the good of the individual at all. It's the good of God shining through. Master says, "Why callest thou me good? There is but one good." So all of the good individuals that I know in the world, they're not good. God is good. And it is God's good that is shining through. There is no evil, for in this entire creation we have just described, there could be no such thing as evil. In all of God's kingdom, there could be no evil. As there could be no good in person, there can be no evil in person. Good is a quality of God, and evil has no qualities. It occupies no space. Again, it's an image in thought. There is no good and there is no evil. Not in person, nor in condition. Evil has no real existence anyhow. That is agreed. Everyone agrees on that. Even in the world of science it is agreed that there is no such thing as a condition of evil. That which appears as evil is a negative or an absence of good. So there's no such thing as an entity or an identity called evil. There is no evil. There is no good. Now, if we use our own old illustration of the hand, here's my hand extended to you. And I sit back here and say to you, it is neither a good hand nor an evil hand. Because this hand can't do evil, but it can't do good. The best it can do is be an instrument for me. So of itself, there's no good and there's no evil. And so you can go from your body, through your body, from head to foot, and you will find this, that your body has not a single quality of good or evil in it. It has no power of acting. It is absolutely an instrument given to you for your use. You can use your body in the human sense of both good and evil. You can use it or misuse it. But remember this, that you have to be in that human sense that acknowledges both good and evil. But supposing that you accept this teaching that there is neither good nor evil, now you can't use your body either for good or evil. You can't even use it. Now it goes back to Scripture. Your body is the temple of the living God. Just think what happens in your consciousness in this second when you realize that in abandoning the belief in good and evil, you've made it impossible for you to use your body for good or evil. Now you've left it as an instrument of God, that which it was originally intended to be. Know ye not that your body is the temple of the living God? How can there be any good in it, and how can there be any bad in it? All that can be in it is God government, God life, and it has the age of God. Don't ever forget that. The moment you give up the belief that this hand has evil or good in it, and you then see that the body has neither good nor evil in it, it has no age in it, and it has no youth. Don't forget all the people who are priding themselves on their youth today are going to be laughing a different tune in a few years. Because as long as there's good and evil in their mind, there will be good and evil in their body, young and old in their body, sickness and health in their body. But don't be concerned because I repeat over and over and over again the story of my hand, the illustration of my hand. Be grateful to be reminded over and over and over again, this hand cannot do good or do evil. I can, but I is God. And because I is God, there is neither good nor evil. There is only God government, whatever that may be. We do not use the body for good. We do not use the body for evil. There is neither good nor evil. There is only God governing itself. And this body is an instrument of God, the temple of the living God. Every bit of this body responds to God impulse. Not to a good human impulse or a bad human impulse, but to a God impulse. Every speck of this body is receptive and responsive to God's government, God's laws, God's life, God's wisdom, God's love. Everyone leads the monastic life the very moment they agree that nothing good nor evil can enter here, only God. God is in his temple. Hold anything you want in your mind, any object, look right at it, and realize that of itself it can do nothing. Of itself it can't be good or bad. Of itself it can't live or die. Of itself it is nothing but a dead image. And whatever it becomes, you are empowering it. And if you're living in a world of good and evil, you can give it the power to be good and you can give it the power to be evil. But if you withdraw good and evil, go back into the original Eden where there was neither good nor evil, and you will find that you have given your body to God. God's government, God's law, God's life, God's wisdom, God's love, and nothing else can operate in or on or through your body. That's accepting spiritual life, spiritual government, spiritual jurisdiction, a spiritual life, a spiritual being, and a spiritual body. Thank you.